You're watching The Last Stand with Brian Custer.
That's right. It is The Last Stand. I'm Brian Custer. We bring you the biggest names in the sport. And this episode is brought to you by our new sponsor, True Taxes Corp. You looking to get your taxes done? Make sure you contact a True Taxes Corp professional. Well, joining us today for this episode, you can call him the boxing promoter extraordinaire. He is the cherry of Matchroom Sports. None other than the Eddie Hearn here on The Last Stand. Eddie, it's been a long time, but welcome to The Last Stand.
Thank you, Brian. Making my debut. I mean, it just seems quite strange, but you know, when you slid into my DMs this week, I was like, wow, Brian Custer, this is it. I've made it. I'm on The Last Stand. That's the happen here.
My brother, listen, talking about amazing, you're coming off an amazing performance from one of your fighters in Jaron Boots Ennis. First time at 154, gets a first round knockout. What do you think is the future for Boots Ennis?
Honestly, like, obviously it's my job to always hype, if you like, overhype these guys. But every now and again, someone comes along that, you know, makes my job so easy because I can put him into fights. I can, you know, look at how we're going to maneuver his career and not really worry about what we're going to bump into along the way. So, you know, after he finished at 147, it was frustrating really because he beat Jaron Ennis, who was the number one welterweight in the world other than the Boots, unified the division, became lineal champ, won the Ring Magazine belt, and just couldn't make 47 anymore. He was really draining himself so bad to make it. And we had a couple of options, you know, that came in from Saudi Arabia, and he just said, I can't do it anymore. You know, sooner or later, I'm going to get myself in trouble at 147, you know, physically, medically, it's all going to go wrong. So trust me when I say, when you see me at 54, you won't believe what you see. So we made that step up. He said, look, I just want a top 15 guy. Let me get my body right. Let me see how I feel on fight week. Let me do my strength and conditioning. And then after that, I'll fight anybody. And what we saw was just an explosion of power and precision. And, you know, it lit up the place. And you'll get the critics who says, you know, Lima, who's Lima? Lima's a good fighter. He's been on the road. He's beaten so many undefeated guys. He's IBO world champion. He's top 10 with every governing body. He was just flabbergasted by what he saw. But now is the most important part of Boots' career. We did it at 47. There's no point me keep talking about how great this young man is if we don't get the opposition to prove it. And that's going to be the plan moving forward.
You know, a lot of people are saying if Virgil Ortiz beats Erickson Lubin, why not Virgil Ortiz, Jaron Boots Ennis? What do you say to that?
Listen, we sat in a room maybe 2-3 months ago, me, Oscar, Eric Gomez, and DAZN, and we flushed out a deal that we all felt was the right deal for that fight, Boots against Ortiz. We went away, we presented that to Jaron Ennis. He signed all the terms for that fight. We're yet to get the final confirmation from Golden Boy, but Eric did call me last week and said, look, if we beat Lubin, it's a good fight coming up, you know, then we want to try and move forward and fight Boots. I really hope they're being genuine. And I do believe that Oscar and Eric, they do want to make great fights. And for me, when you talk about fights in the US market right now, Boots against Ortiz, one of the very best. I mean, it's very unusual to get two guys in their prime like that. You know, the clash of styles is perfect, I think, particularly for Jaron, but, you know, Oscar thinks the same for Virgil. And I just feel that that's such a great fight to make. And, you know, hopefully he gets through Lubin and hopefully we see that in the first quarter of 2026.
No, that'd be fantastic. You know, there are other guys who've obviously called out Boots. Keith Thurman is one of them.
Yeah.
And, you know, obviously Errol Spence is now going to come back, he said, at the beginning of the year, wants to fight at 154. Do you see Boots fighting any of those guys as well in the future?
Honestly, like when I had a meeting with him on Sunday after the fight, and I said, look, you know, privately, is there anyone you don't like the style matchup of? You know, it might be you've got Mert Salayev, who's not that well known, but he's very strong, comes forward, destroyed Tim Tszyu. And he went, no, honestly, anyone you want, right? So the key for Boots really is the legacy, the championships. And really that's the belt holders. So you've got Fundora, you've got Zayas, which is a great fight. you've got Murtsalayev, you've got Abbas Baru, who's just won the WBA title. But then you've got those other guys that don't have a belt, but are marquee fights. Virgil Ortiz, Errol Spence, Charlo's name even come up, the other day as well. But the thing is, Brian, the game, like Boots, everybody in boxing knows how good Boots is. So for these names like Errol Spence and Charlo, you can imagine the number they're going to ask for the fight, because they don't really want that fight on their resume. I mean, I'm sure they think deep down they can win the fight, but they also know how good Ennis is, and people will use the excuse of, what do I get out of? He's not really a name. But you can't really say that anymore. He's packing out the Philly arena every time we go. He's doing great numbers for the zone. Everybody's talking about him. And we've got to keep raising that profile, but we've got to keep taking those fights. And I would love him to go on a run where he can start heading towards undisputed at 154. That's really important to him. And, I do see him moving definitely to 60 in the near future, and probably to 68. He's a huge, huge guy. And you're going to see the best of him as he's allowed to physically, perform to his best capabilities.
I read where you said something to the effect of, this is the guy that is going to get the mantle, basically the baton, from Terrence Crawford as the next pound-for-pound best fighter in the world. Can you believe that?
I really do. And also, let's remember, he's 10 years younger than Terrence Crawford, right? And Crawford's amazing. I mean, I think he's just one of the greatest fighters of our generation. But when you look at what's coming through right now, over the next, 6, 12 months, tell me a better fight than Terrence Crawford against Boots Ennis. I mean, again, we have to raise our profile. Terrence is only going to fight again if the money's huge. And he knows how good Boots is. He will think he can beat Boots. Of course, Terrence thinks he can beat everybody. And most of the time, well, nearly all the time in his career, he has done. But I just feel like that is like a generational great fight between a guy who's been there and done it all and his successor. It's not, I can't say it's a fight we're targeting, but it's a fight we would love. And obviously with Crawford being able to fight at 54, but probably 160, sometimes when the fans start getting on that, I say, just tell me a better matchup than Crawford Ennis. I mean, it's just mouth-watering. So, but we've got to prove ourselves first. Terrence has proved himself. But I think when you look at the future of those guys, Shakur, he's another guy, Bam, he's another one of our guys. Like, these are the young guys that are going to be around for another 4, 5, 6 years. And I put Ennis right in that bracket. And I really believe, some fighters, they're great defensive fighters. They have great footwork. He's really aggressive. He's a puncher. He has it all. So his footwork, his defense is incredible, but he comes to knock you out, and he's heavy-handed. So when you talk about Tom and Jerry and entertaining fight fans, this guy is he's just sublime to watch.
I know that you mentioned Shakur. I saw that on social media. He had a back and forth with Teofimo. Is that definitely a fight we're going to see at the beginning of 2026?
Yeah, it's definitely trending that way. I mean, I think, all the key stakeholders would like to make it happen, whether that's His Excellency Turki Al-Sheikh, whether that's Shakur, whether that's Matchroom, whether that's DAZN, whether that's Top Rank. Everybody who's involved, I think, likes the idea of that fight. I think it's a good challenge for Shakur. I said to him at the weekend, he was at our show, and I said, people like you only really get beat or get into real deep competition when you move too far up in weight. And don't forget, Shakur is already a 3-division world champion, at 29 years old, or 28, 29, approaching that. But he did start featherweight. So we were talking about the size of Teofimo Lopez, saying he's not a massive 140, but he's still a decent size 140. And I said to Shakur, you'll be the smaller guy in that fight. No, I won't. I said, no, you will be. I said, I don't think it will necessarily affect anything. I think you win the fight, but that's when it starts to become a real challenge, when you are fighting bigger guys. And that's a really interesting style matchup. I don't know how it will gel, the two styles. They're both incredibly skillful, and Teo's really tricky at times and sometimes a bit weird, the way he fights, but he's an incredible talent. And that's another style matchup. We talk about Ennis and Ortiz in their prime, exactly the same with Shakur and Teofimo. We don't always see those matchups of those guys in their prime, and that would be a great one for the sport.
I love it. Tell me why, because let's talk about some of the fights you got. Tell me why Conor Benn versus Chris Eubank 2 will be different this time around?
Well, I mean, the same but different. I mean, the first one was just an incredible war. I mean, two guys fighting solely off emotion. You know, Conor Benn had been out of the ring for about 15 months. He hadn't really boxed on that kind of stage before. He was coming up 2 divisions. So this time, there's a few advantages that he has. One, he's active, which is really important. 2, he's experienced that big occasion before. And 3, I think physically he's bedding much better into 160, even though it's somewhere that we're not going to stay in the future. So it's a tough ask. You know, when the bell goes and they come together, you can see the size in the ring, you know, and that's the real disadvantage for us. But I think Conor just got to be a little bit smarter this time. He can really box as well. But he chose to fight off pure emotion last time. That will happen again because he's his father's son. And that's just how those guys fight. But just a little bit smarter at times. And obviously with Eubank coming up in his late 30s, you know, how much did that fight take out of him? It was a real physical battle last time. So, yeah, we really believe that we can upset the odds this time.
All right, instead of those press conferences, or especially between you and Chris Eubank, what is the nexus of the beef between you guys?
Honestly, don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, my dad was like inseparable from his father, right? My dad was his promoter. He was best man at his wedding. You know, he promoted him for 95% of his career. They were like best mates. And when Eubank turned pro, we did a bit of work with him and we've never really got on, if I'm honest, but I don't really have any beef with him. I think he's an entertaining guy, you know, a little bit quirky at times. And he's just sort of, he really seems to have it in for me. So it's great for the promotion. You know, maybe one day we'll shake hands and go out for a bite to eat, but I guess it's not going to be anytime soon.
But say so. That I guess not. And you put it even on your Netflix match, watching that was just entertaining. Watching the interaction between you two.
What is, I guess the first question is, will we see Anthony Joshua fighting in 2026?
Yeah, 2026 for sure. I mean, I think that after the defeat to Dubois, people sometimes don't realize. I mean, AJ is this huge guy in stature and personality and always smiling. And I think people probably don't realize how much that loss affected him. You know, it was to become a three-time world heavyweight champion. Obviously, it was in London, 95,000 people. And it was a tough night for him. And then coming back, he had an elbow injury that they tried to let heal. Then it didn't heal. He went back into camp. Then he had to have an operation 3 months out. And it's been a really frustrating time. And, you know, I was just with him a few weeks ago. And now he's really mentally and physically ready for the kind of last roll of the dice of the career. You know, Turki Al-Sheikh has made it clear he wants the fight with Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua. I still think it's arguably the biggest in the sport. But we just need to come back and get in that groove again, get that confidence and get firing. So, you know, it's funny because he said to me the other day, you know, a lot of fighters have that that kind of run out under the radar, don't they? Like, I said, yeah, unfortunately, you're not really an under the radar guy. You know, I mean, firstly, everyone knows who you are in the world. We're not going to be able to just pop over to Mexico and have an 8-rounder on the undercard. But he just wants to get back into the groove. And I expect him to fight February time. And then I think go straight into the fight with Tyson Fury. I think His Excellency hasn't missed yet on those big fights that he wants to deliver. You know, he's negotiating with us. I believe he's negotiating or talking to Team Tyson Fury. So why not? You know, I think it's a fight that would be a big shame if that didn't happen. I think just one fight, you know, coming up probably in February and then ready to fight Tyson Fury. Like I said, you know, His Excellency hasn't missed yet making those big fights. We're talking to him. I believe he's talking to Team Tyson Fury as well. So it would just be a shame if we never got that fight. You know, AJ, you know, we signed to fight Deontay Wilder. We were going to announce it in the ring and he lost to Joseph Parker. But other than that, AJ's really fought pretty much everybody from his era. And I think to cap it off with Tyson Fury would be very special.
What about, you know, it's happy you mentioned that. Because I was going to say, you know, Wilder's another guy who says he wants to continue fighting, wants to fight again. what do you think about AJ and Wilder as the comeback fight and then into Tyson?
Yeah, I mean, look, while they're both fighting, those two, it's always going to be talked about. Like I said, when AJ beat Otto Wallin, Deontay Wilder was supposed to beat Joseph Parker. We had all the contracts signed. We were going to announce it in the ring after his fight. It fell apart. AJ's looked really good, but had a bad night against Dubois. Wilder hasn't looked good really in the last few fights, but he won last time out. I think he's talking about getting another win coming up, and he's always dangerous. If he starts getting a little bit of confidence back, then he's always going to be a threat. And AJ against Wilder would always be box office. Two huge punchers, two very fast heavyweights. Arguably sometimes two vulnerable heavyweights because of the way they fight. So, I think it's one that fans would always love to see.
And I guess we'll wrap that part of this conversation up with, do you think before AJ is done, we'll get Joshua Fury, Joshua Wilder?
I think you're more likely to get Joshua Fury at this point. I do think that Wilder fight could always be there. We're up for it. But I think the way things are tracking and trending, I think it could be all eyes on a Tyson Fury fight late summer of next year. So that's really our main focus. But just looking forward to seeing him back in the ring. It's been a year now. So he's ready and he's in camp.
Talking about another Nakano fighter under your banner, Katie Taylor. When will we see the undisputed champ, Katie Taylor, back in the ring?
Well, I'll be honest, it's the first time I've ever heard her say in interviews, if I fight again. I mean, she's 39 coming up. She's a phenomenal athlete and fighter. And the last few years have been tough for her. It's actually only the last fight against Serrano that she used her head and boxed the way she can box, which is use her feet. And, when she does that, I think she's unbeatable. But over the last 2 or 3 years, she's had war after war after war. The Serrano trilogy has been incredible. To be part of that, that huge exposure on Netflix as well. And she's made an absolute fortune, money that we never dreamed of making, So I think a Croke Park fight, which is her stadium back home, which holds like 70-odd thousand, that would definitely lure her back in. But right now she's quite chilled. It's the first time I've really seen her just saying, I'm going to have a bit of time off. So she's earned the right to do that. Me personally, if that was it, I would, I wouldn't blame her. I think she's done everything, amateur and pro. But there's, I'm sure she's going to get itchy knuckles while she's sitting there eating her turkey at Christmas. So we'll see how the new year plays out.
Yeah, that's funny. And as of right now, obviously you got her, also Clarissa Shields, pound for pound. And I know you're biased, but pound for pound, best female fighter in the world right now.
Yeah, I'm definitely biased because, I'm very close with Katie and I like Clarissa a lot. I mean, me and her sometimes go backwards and forwards, but I find her very entertaining, very amusing, and she's a phenomenal fighter. I mean, she's a 2-time Olympic gold medalist. She's multi-undisputed. I think the downside for Clarissa is the opposition and the dance partners. She's quite limited in that respect. Unless she can move back down. She seems to be really physically happy sitting at the higher weight classes now. And that's really difficult to have the liquidity of opponents. If she can come back towards 154, which is a lot of work, you've got people like Michaela Meyer. I think that's a great fight, her against Clarissa Shields. Sandy Ryan, some of the people we represent as well. There's just more options down there. Lauren Price, those kind of fighters at 47 who can move to 54. But I just don't know, if this stage in her life she wants to start shredding weight down to 154 and beyond. But she's a phenomenal fighter. Those two, in all honesty, very difficult to split. I sometimes look at what Katie did historically in terms of opening the doors. She was the one that actually canvassed to the IOC to allow women's boxing into the Olympics. It was a long process. She had to go and have a fight with another opponent in front of the IOC board to convince them to do it. I mean, but then again, Clarissa, her background, where she came from in Flint, it's just two phenomenal fighters. But in answer to your question, Katie Taylor.
Got it. You talked about one of the things that have been written about is you're signing up in Waver and the heavyweight there. Talk to me about how good you think this kid is going to be.
Sorry, I didn't catch that. You
Whitaker. Talk to me about that.
yeah.
Signing up Whitaker as the heavyweight. How good is he?
Yeah, light heavyweight, 175 pounds. Yeah, just like every now and again, someone comes along who park the talent. I mean, this is an Olympic silver medalist, one of the best amateurs the country's ever produced. As a pro, he's just got it, right? And I'm not just talking about in the ring. I'm talking about commercially. I'm talking about the personality. I'm talking about the self-promotion. I'm talking about the social media. Like, he is a ready-made star. Now, I'm interested in how far we can take Ben Whittaker, the boxer. But I also know that on that road, people are going to be tuning in to watch him lose, to watch him win, to see him fight the greats, to see him try and become world champion. And if this was just a random guy that didn't really have the amateur pedigree and, just had this personality and it was a bit wacky on social media, that's one thing. But this guy has ability. He's a world-class fighter. He'll be out again November 29. He's still got a bit of work to do. He's still quite inexperienced as a pro. He hasn't really been able to get that momentum going yet. And we'll box him November 29. Then we're going to bring him over to America for his US debut in early 2026. And then he'll have a big fight in the summer back home. So that division, Beterbiev, Bivol, Benavidez, and even below that, our guy Callum Smith, Yard, Boatzy. Like, it's a really tough division, but he has the ability to hang with all of those guys. So just got to get him the momentum now, but a huge star.
Eddie, if you could throw out all the red tape and you said, man, for 2026, this is the fight I want to make, what would that be?
Well, it's probably three, actually. It's Joshua against Fury, because that's been kind of like eluded me a lot of my career as well. It's Boots against Terence Crawford, and it's probably Bam against Inoue. I mean, they're two guys in the top 6 pound for pound. Bam currently is about to try and unify again on November 22nd, and he's 2 divisions below Inoue. But for me, that's still like a dream fight. He's going to move to Bantam quite soon. I think those two guys are incredible. So, yeah, there's 3 for you there. Obviously, Joshua Fury is a very personal goal of mine. But the others, just tremendous fights.
You mentioned him kind of earlier in the interview. Give me your honest assessment of what you think about Turki Al-Sheikh and what he has done since he's gotten into the sport of boxing.
Well, when you think it's only been a couple of years, I mean, what we've seen is, 1, we've seen some tremendous fights, right? 2, we've seen some unbelievable opportunities for fighters, both in terms of actually signing those legacy fights and also financially, achieving money beyond their wildest dreams. So I think that they've definitely made a few mistakes along the way, as we all do. But the actual value that they've had to the sport and to the ecosystem of boxing, all of a sudden now you've got Netflix coming in, right? I mean, this is a huge thing for boxing, makes the zone more competitive. You've got Amazon still there. See what happens with ESPN. Now you've got Paramount coming in with Dana White and TKO. So the whole ecosystem, I think when you're making the big fights, you're making the sport exciting again. And that benefits everybody. Us, because we're involved with him, we're involved with the show. But even away from our shows, we're seeing the ticket sales continuing to increase. We're seeing the viewership continuing to increase as well. More interest in boxing, because boxing's always been kind of dressed with that, well, we never see the good fights. Well, we are seeing the good fights now. I mean, a good example of that over the last 12 months was obviously Usyk Fury twice, Bivol against Beterbiev twice, Crawford against Canelo Alvarez, Joshua against Dubois against Usyk, Ben against Eubank, all these like 70, 80, 90,000 fights. So I think that, the one thing that I've learned about him is he's got a very balanced mind of he wants to work with everybody, so just when you think that maybe he's going to move down the TKO route, he comes and extends his partnership with us or Queensbury or something. You know, I think he's got a good understanding of the ecosystem of the sport. I think his intentions are very pure for the sport. I think he absolutely adores the sport of boxing. And he's very driven and very motivated. You know, he's not going anywhere. You know, he's like I said, not everything works, but I've loved being a part of it. It's been a crazy ride. Crazy ride. I mean, you know, the way they do business is incredible. There's no messing around.
What about then, you kind of mentioned that too, Dana White, TKO. They are now in it. Like I said, calling it Zuppa Boxing. They're going to have their own belts.
Yeah.
Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been an admirer of Dana. You know, I know him quite well. He's been very courteous to me over the years at the MMA events, UFC events. And you know, I've always looked upon him as one of the great promoters, you know, almost like someone to look up to. And I'll continue to do that. I don't see there being any beef. But obviously, when he comes into your world and he starts saying, you know, I'm going to control boxing, I'm going to, you know, all of a sudden, you know, make sure that I'm the CEO of boxing and this and that, then, you know, he's going to get your back up, you know, and that's what it'll do, really. And we will make sure that we're number one and we continue to be number one. I'm looking forward to the challenge, to be honest. You know, I'm looking forward to all of a sudden seeing who is number one and who will be number one in the sport. And for me, I don't like the idea of, you know, their own belt, or I don't like the idea of, you know, necessarily changing the rules or changing the ring or, you know, changing the Ali Act, which I think is even more, you know, of an issue. And I think we're going to double down on the traditions of the sport. I think governing bodies and belts are important, to be honest with you. I think fighters want to win the WBC World Championship. I think they want to win the WBA, the IBF, the WBO, the Ring Magazine. They don't want to fight for a Zuffa belt, in my opinion. But we shall see how it all plays out. And again, people say, is it good or bad for the sport? I think it's very good for the sport. It has to be good for the sport that Dana White is coming into the sport of boxing. Ask yourself why. Because boxing's red hot.
I like it. You and Oscar De La Hoya certainly have had some choice words for one another. He says, my problem with Eddie Hearn is he doesn't know how to build a fighter's career. Give me your thoughts on Oscar De La Hoya and Golden Boy.
Well, I mean, Anthony Joshua, we didn't do too bad there. You know, Katie Taylor, these are all people that we spoke about. Even Bam Rodriguez, Dimitri Bivol. I mean, you know, we've been involved with them from either their professional debut or before they were world champion and a long way before. So I think when you're new into the sport, that's always sometimes a criticism, you know. But the reality is we're not new in the sport anymore. You know, I've been promoting for 16 years. Matchroom have been promoting for 40 years. We know what we're doing. We know how to build fighters. Now, we're definitely aggressive with our matchmaking. And I think sometimes that's a criticism that we face, you know, that we are very aggressive with our matchmaking. And we are. There's no doubt about it. I like to make great fights. I don't want to sit there and watch one-sided fights. And if our fighters are good enough, they will win. And I've always believed that. And, you know, sometimes we go on a bit of a run where we lose 3 or 4 big fights. And they're, Matchroom lost another one. Oh, they're like, it's like, what do you want here? You know, sometimes boxing fans are so fickle and confused, aren't they? They're like, Matchroom's fighters are losing, but you're watching the best fights. And that's what happens at elite level. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose.
I like it. Give me the best promoter in the sport of boxing, not named Eddie Hearn and Matchroom.
Oh, I was going to say, sorry. I'd already answered your question about 10 seconds ago. I like Oscar's energy at the moment, if I'm honest. Like I feel like, look, with Oscar, one thing you can never deny is he was one of the greatest fighters of all time. So that credibility, and I mean, the reality is he's a star. I mean, you know, I'm a great promoter, but I could never fight, you know, let alone have a professional debut, let alone be a pound for pound multi-division world champion like him. So I think he's really got the bit between his teeth at the moment. anyone with a TV contract right now is dangerous. And right now, we have one, he has one, and obviously Top Rank are, about to maybe strike. They're not. They've left ESPN. PBC are a bit, back and forth with Amazon. So I think actually us and Golden Boy are in a great position at the moment. I do think Top Rank as a business is a great promotional company. And Aram, I mean, he's 97 years old. Just phenomenal. So, yeah, I think, Oscar and Top Rank right up there, But things change, things change. I like our spot right now. I've always said we're the only global promotional company in the world. So we are the only promotional company that's week in, week out promoting shows in, a dozen countries around the world. Everybody else has got their own individual market. So I like our spot.
What do you think about the Jake Paul versus Gervonta Davis exhibition fight?
Yeah. I have no idea really what to think about it. I mean, firstly, I think it's a farce. Then I think, who's going to win? And then I'm thinking, is there going to be a winner? I don't know. Like, it's all. Is the size too much? I don't think Jake's bad. Like, obviously, I don't think he's world class. Gervonta's a very sharp puncher. Is he motivated? Where's his head at? Can he hurt him? I have no idea. I mean, look, but the fact that I'm even debating it with you and means that probably I'll want to see what happens in there. And it's another huge event. And, I'm not mad on that one because you talk about a lightweight fighting a cruiserweight. I think it's a bit strange, but you can't deny it. The eyeballs and the attention that Jake Paul's bringing to the sport. Same people will say, do you think he's good or bad for the sport? Good, honestly. Like, I think, you know what it's like, Brian. Once you fall in love with boxing, it's a real genuine love. And although Jake's about making money and I believe he loves the sport. He's got his own promotional company. He's doing great things. He's training hard. He's taking the camp seriously. So why not? There should be no barriers to entry. And just because he's Jake Paul, why shouldn't he be allowed to fight or be a player in the industry?
And as a promoter, what do you think about Gervonta taking this? Listen, he talked about, hey, look, I've been fighting since I was this, 7 years old. Why not? Why not have a fight where I can enjoy myself and obviously make a lot of money? Now, there are other people who say, well, shouldn't you be about legacy? Shouldn't you then be targeting whether it be a Rotary match or Shakur or Diafimo or the rest of the Devin? Your thoughts on Gervonta?
Yeah, I mean, look, as they say, firstly, you can't eat legacy, but I think it's you should always be chasing it. It's difficult, because we had a few conversations with Jake Paul and AJ, and it was like, what do I think about that fight? I was very honest. I said, I think it's a catastrophic mismatch. I think it's a one-round fight. But AJ could make 80, 90, 100 million. So how can you not take it? I mean, I think it's all about the stage you're at in your career. There is an argument that Gervonta's got a decent legacy because he's been a multi-weight world champion. But for me, he's still in his prime now, and I would love to see him competing against the best in the sport. I feel like he's kind of checked out a little bit of the sport of boxing. I think, for what we said earlier, for all the ways you can love boxing, you can probably hate it as well. The politics of it, the letdown, the disappointment, maybe the disloyalty. So I think maybe he's kind of fallen out of love of it a little bit and says, listen, let me go and make my, 20, 30, 40 million. I don't know what he's going to make, but it's a lot of money. And he will look at it and go, well, I'd rather make that kind of money than half of that to fight Shakur Stevenson, where it's a 50-50 matchup. So I think sometimes common sense prevails. I don't mind it if he was like, look, I want my legacy, but let me just do this and I'll be right back. But he's not really saying that. The messages that he's getting off is, I'm actually done after this. I don't like the sport. Let me get my money and then I'll see you later. And I think for fight fans, that's a bit disappointing because of how good he is.
What do you think about Benavidez Jr.?
Like Anthony Lard, a lot. He's a very tough man, but I just think Benavidez is a real handful. It's the punch output more than anything. The power's good, but it's just really the output and the heavy dutiness of the fight. And Yard is a little bit of a pot shotter. He's a good counter puncher as well. He's got good power, but I just can't. He's not going to be able to match Benavidez for work rate. I mean, unless he can hurt him, and he can punch. But I do think Benavidez is a serious favourite in that fight.
Lastly here, Eddie Hearn, give me the biggest misconception about Eddie
Hearn. I mean, it's difficult because they'll say that obviously as a promoter, you're all about the money. And that, of course, we're running a business here. But I've been around the sport since I was 8 years old, when my dad started promoting it. I love it more than anything. And I think probably the biggest misconception of a promoter is the promoter always wants to make the biggest fights. Right? I mean, that's the key for us is we want to make the biggest fights because guess what? That makes the most money. And me as a fight fan, I want to see the best fights. But sometimes when a fighter takes a poor fight, the misconception is it's down to the promoter. It's really not at all. The promoter doesn't want that fight. Now, the trainer might want the fight, or that manager might want that fight because it's an easy payday, or we want one in the middle, or we want a little stepping stone before we get to this one. We want you to go right there because we want to set out the arena. We want to do the pay-per-view buys. We want to make money, and we want to be part of a big event. So I do feel like not just me, but a lot of promoters sometimes get the short end of the stick in that respect. And I just want to see great fights, genuinely. And I think 2026, with everything happening in the sport, with TKO, we're kind of doubling down on the greatness of boxing. We want to make the big unification matchups. We want to make the pound-for-pound classics. And that's what we'll be attempting to do next year.
And we'll wrap it up with this. And I mean,
I kind of get tired when I hear people say, "Oh, boxing it down," and I'm like, no, it's not. You see all of the, whether it's Netflix and Prime, all of these people trying to get these streamers trying to get into it. It's sport evolves like all of them. In your opinion, give us the future of the sport of boxing.
I think that boxing's in the best place it's ever been in. I mean, when you think about it, boxing doesn't always deliver, but it always makes the most noise, right? Digitally, across social media. And when you get it right with a big fight, there's nothing like it. But I think when you look at the powerhouses, the media powerhouses involved with the sport right now, the influx of investment from Saudi Arabia, the quality of the fighters, the willingness for them to be part of the big nights, Dana White coming in, TKO coming in. I mean, I think boxing's red hot right now. I really do. And I think that, like I said, we don't always get it right. And the numbers don't always reflect the noise that we hear. But I think now the sport's getting bigger and bigger because of the fights we're seeing. And I think 2026 will be a massive year for boxing.
It always seems like it's a massive year for Matchroom Sports and Eddie Hearn. I have been looking forward to doing this for so long, man. I appreciate you taking the time talking with us.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, all. Good to speak to you.
Absolutely. There he is. It's the chairman of Matchroom Sports, the one and only Eddie Hearn.
That's going to do it for this episode of The Last Stand. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you again next week.